Hello, this is Dr. Rick Hofer, your instructor for budgeting and financial management. It's week 6 already. Can you believe it? And I want to do this video to talk about the post-week 5 analysis and a preview of upcoming attractions. So let's get going. So let's look back at weeks 1 through 5. By now, everyone who's going to stay in the class has completed the Prove It exercise. After that, there's been the Are You a Fundraiser post, a long budget models post where you describe terms you understood and those that were less clear. And then you've done exercise 8.1, which looks at cost analysis. And then yesterday you turned in the last of the last assignment, which was financial ratios. So by now you should be getting pretty comfortable with the mechanics of Excel. You know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and things like that. Pretty simple things, but that's all you've been required to know, and so I hope that you're able to do that. Your formatting skills should also be getting better as we go along. So what else have you done? You've done that, the Excel, the mechanics, you've done some writing, you've done some thinking. But let me talk about what's next. The next and more important step for your Excel exercises is to begin to think about the numbers like a savvy manager. All right, it's one thing to be able to come up with the numbers, you use the right formula and all that, but so what? What does it mean? That's what's the most important thing. You need to understand the purpose of the spreadsheet and the analysis you are doing for these assignments. All right, we're not just doing it so you can look at a bunch of numbers and make them look pretty. There's a purpose behind each of the spreadsheets, and that's what you need to focus on now that you're more comfortable with the actual mechanics. So, for example, the Prove It exercise had a purpose, which was to figure out the projected cost of the program and add it to a line graph to see the progression over time. This could be useful to a manager because, well, as you saw, the cost this upcoming year, the projected costs for 2018 were quite a bit higher than the actual costs before. So you might want to look at that and say, well, why is that? Now that we see what it is both in the number and in the graph, well, it kind of jumps out at us. So what are we going to do about that information? What are we going to do with that information? And then the purpose of the exercise 8.1 was to determine the cost per output and the cost per outcome. And these are important to understand for many reasons. But you need to know how much it's costing you to do these things so that you can write that in the grant or show it to the board or just see, well, that seems high or low or whatever. Now, the thing that came out in exercise 8.1 for a number of people is that they had pretty much everything correct, and then they made some kind of silly mistake, okay? So they didn't actually use the right set of numbers to determine the indirect cost ratio, so nothing else is going to be right from that. Another thing that happened was that people didn't pay attention to the instructions well enough, and they put in the wrong number of outputs for several of the programs. And so even though everything else was done correctly up to that point, if you input the wrong number of outputs, you're going to get the wrong cost per output. It's just that simple. So with all of these spreadsheets, you can have everything right except one or two things, and then your numbers are totally wrong. If you make decisions based on those wrong numbers, you're making decisions that could be disastrous. So you can't stop paying attention. Everything has to be right, or else nothing important will be right. You'll be undermining the purpose of that spreadsheet. So that's why it's important to think about the purpose, not just the mechanics of every spreadsheet that you turn in and that you create. So that's the first 5 weeks, and we're making great progress. And I'm very happy, I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. But now, what are we doing this week? Oh, you also did a long post on terminology and business models. And that post that you did, and did so well, is a setup for this week's material on accounting. See, everything ties back together in this course. Now, many of you have said what terms you understand, even if only sort of, from those videos, and what terms you don't understand. This week's material here, week 6, should help you here in better understanding all of those terms that were posted. But you're only going to learn this if you take the time to really delve into the book and the video that I've made for you for this week. I mean, it's an investment of your time so that you can understand the material. You need to understand the vocabulary of accounting so you can understand the documents that all managers need to understand. The statement of cash flows, the statement of activities, the statement of financial position, balance sheet, all these terms. You need to understand how to look at them and read them and understand them, but you also need to understand where they came from. If you don't understand how they're all linked together, you're likely not to understand them really at all. And they all start with that accounting journal and debits and credits and all those kind of things that you think, hey, I'm a social worker. Why do I need to understand that? I'm not an accountant. It's right. You're not an accountant, but you want to become not just a social worker or direct practice social worker. You want to run organizations. And for that, these things are vital. These statements that we'll look at this week allow you to look at a point in time. And when you look at them, you can understand if there are problems beginning to creep in. Okay? So if your balance sheet starts to show a deficit, that's a bad thing. You're going to have to address that sooner rather than later. But if you don't know what to look at or where to look for it or why it's happening, you're not going to be able to fix the problem. So this is a point in time. The financial ratios that you did in week 5 show the organization's position over time and allow you to understand if the agency's finances are stable, improving, or even declining. So that's how these two things fit together. You got the ratios to kind of give you the big picture over time, and you have the financial statements that we're looking at this week to show you at this point in time, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year. Okay, and obviously those statements that are a point in time during each year end up for the annual figures, which are what are reported in the 990s. Now, obviously, you can look at the financial ratios anytime during the year. You don't have to wait till the end of the year, but it's a convenient time for our course to teach you how to do it. Now, if you're going to work for an agency, you'll want to do this analysis of the time, the financial ratios, before you take a job there. Indeed, even before you interview there, because you don't want to take a job in an organization that's in financial difficulty. Right? If you're looking at 990s, you're not going to have the most up-to-date information, but you can certainly get a sense of the trend over the years. And if you're looking for a managerial position, which I hope you will, then having this information in mind is going to be helpful to you in your interview. You can show that you're above and beyond the typical person who they may be interviewing. Now, this may seem dry, this material may seem boring, this material may seem too hard for social workers, right? But it's not. The fact is, if you truly want to get into upper management at a well-run nonprofit, you must dig into the weeds of the accounting journal and statements about finances now so that you understand it. You won't be prepared to get such a job later if you can't do this now, if you don't learn about this now. Now, is this too hard a thing for people to learn? Obviously, it's not. People with MBAs do this. People with MPAs do this. People with management degrees in nonprofit management are learning these skills. They're just basic skills to any kind of management position. And sometimes MBAs and MPAs and MNMs are getting the top jobs because board members who hire the top CEOs understand that these skills of financial analysis are prerequisites for running any organization. Social work experience at these top jobs is, nice, but it's not vital for top positions. People with MBAs come straight out of school. They're the same age as you, but they're getting higher level jobs because they can talk the talk that managers in nonprofit organizations need to be able to talk, even if they come from a business administration. Public administration and master's graduates, they're getting these jobs. People with masters in nonprofit management are getting the top positions. Research shows social workers are not getting these top positions as often, not because they're not good, capable people, but because they don't have the skills to be able to talk about finances. I'm really stressing this, and I want you to really take this to heart. If your career aspiration is to be a CEO or even a top level within the programmatic side, you need to understand the accounting aspects of the job. If all you want to be is a manager or program director, that's fine. That's your career. Do what you want. But you'll be more competitive even at that level if you understand how accounting works and where your budget information comes from. So for the future, we're going to have a few more weeks of Excel assignments. As you do them and as you turn them in on time, think not only about the mechanics of the Excel, like what number goes where and how to create the formula, but think about the purpose of each one of these assignments. What do the numbers actually tell you? Why would you want to create such a spreadsheet? What can you do with the information? This is going beyond the basics. I mean, you could do the basics with a calculator. You might even be able to do it just with paper and pencil. But that's not the point. The point is, what do the numbers tell you about the reason you're doing it? Each exercise also, in addition, is related to the final paper you're going to turn in. So you're not just gaining Excel skills, but you're learning now to use these skills in a real-life analysis that's going to be due later this semester. Everything builds on everything else. So if you kind of scrimp now on the learning, you're going to have a more difficult time with the final paper. Speaking of that, have you found the agency yet that you're going to be writing your final paper on? This is not necessarily an easy thing to find, so you need to be at work at it now. One student weeks ago started trying to find it, and she found that the initial place that she wanted to try wasn't going to let her do it because it was part of a national organization, and the national organization wasn't going to allow this local organization to give her the information that was needed for the paper. Don't think you're going to get this on your first try. You might, and you might not. So remember that in order to choose an organization, it has to be a nonprofit. This will not work for for-profits. It will not work for government agencies. It has to be a nonprofit. And it needs to file its own Form 990. If you can't find a Form 990 for it, then you're not going to be able to use it for this paper. It can't be a branch of a larger organization that only files its one 990 for all parts of the organization. So these are just prerequisites for you to be able to handle this paper. If you do a national organization, it's going to be like just huge in scope, and that's not required, and in fact it's not even allowed, just for your own sanity. So the last little bit of advice I have here is keep going. This is the part of the semester where everything starts coming at you for every class you're taking. You've got to schedule time for budgeting, and then you better schedule some more. The exercises get more difficult as we go along. They require more time, more thinking. Take advantage of the resources I provide as well. For example, a couple weeks ago I had a video. It took me a long time to put together. I thought it was going to be very useful. And then because it's on YouTube, I can track how many people watch it. There's only been 10 views. And 2 of those were mine. So I know that not everyone is taking full advantage of the resources. The resources, the videos, everything are there for you and to help you learn the material. All right, so I think that's everything I need to tell you now, except keep going, do the work, and ask questions. If you're having questions about the exercise or the formatting or anything, please write your question in the discussion area and I will respond to it. Take care.